All right, it's 8 o'clock. Let's call the Finance and Risk Management Committee of San Diego Community Power to order. Kimberly, could you please call roll?
Yes, San Diego representative.
LaCava here.
Imperial Beach representative is absent today. La Mesa representative.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Is there any public comment for non-agenda items?
There are no public comments.
Thank you. And is there anything to add or remove from the agenda?
Not that I'm aware of.
Very good. We'll move on to item number 1, Treasurer's Report for period ending 8/31/22.
Thank you, Chair Hamora. Good morning, FRMC committee members and staff. I'll be presenting the Treasury Report for the 2 months ending 8/31/2022 for San Diego Community Power. Next slide, please, Kimberly. We finished year to date as we look at our budget to actual comparison as follows. So our operating expenses were about 8% over what we budgeted for year to date for the period. That increase was somewhat offset by the increase in operating expenses, primarily driven from the cost of energy for the period. During the period, approximately, there was an increase in demand from our non-residential customers, which contributed to the net operating revenue, but that increased demand also called for increase in energy costs, coupled with the rising cost of energy. So that is the driver of the offset there. We ended that period with the net position of $12.2 million compared to what we budgeted for at just under $15 million. So again, as I mentioned, the revenue was $180 million compared to the $167 million we budgeted for. Dollar for dollar, that came in at about $13.3 million over budget, again with the offset to the energy costs, rise in energy costs at just under $16 million. For the period, we contributed about, $12.3 million went into our net position, which also contributed to our reserves for the period. Next slide, Kimberly. We're taking a similar look at our actual results compared to our pro forma or projections. This pretty much mirrors what we saw in the budget to actual comparison with some slight deltas. Net operating revenue, again, was 8%, about 8% higher than we had projected. Again, the offset of about a 10.4% increase in energy costs, landing us at $2.5 million below what we had projected for our net position for the period. The graphic on the lower right portion of the slide, you'll see just a graphic depiction of our operating revenues compared to our pro forma, with the operating revenues appearing in the blue bar and pro forma results appearing in the orange bar. Next slide, Kimberly. So this slide essentially depicts where we landed from a reserve perspective. So for the period, we ended with an unrestricted cash position of $49.2 million. When we look at our total liquidity for the period, which also supports our reserves, we had access or availability on our line of credit of just under $37 million, giving us $86 million in access to liquidity as of the period ending 8/31/2022. Then you'll see here depicted in the pie chart is a comparison of where we landed with regard to our reserve target of 90 days cash on hand. So we were year to date, we achieved 29% of that goal. Now, as the year progresses, we expect to see those numbers, the pie chart kind of shift as we move forward into our fiscal year period. Next slide, Kimberly. So with that, I am making a recommendation to the FRMC committee that we advance the treasurer's report for the period ending 8/31/2022 to the board as a consent item to receive and file. I'll turn it back over to you, Chairman.
Thank you, Eric. Do you foresee the energy costs continuing to be where they're at right now? And this being a challenge for, the foreseeable future?
I certainly think, given the current environment that we're in with demand for energy and the cost associated with energy, I do expect to see some continued increases in the energy costs. However, our power services team, as they go out and procure and really get our forecast dialed in, I expect to see some continued impact from the continued rising cost of energy, but that'll be offset based on our hedging position. Another thing, and I'll just preface this, that we're also monitoring as a result of the recent heat events, that we'll start to see some impact from that in our next fiscal reporting period for the period ending September 30, 2022. So we'll see some impact from that. So I also anticipate seeing some changes as a result of that heat event as well.
Yeah, I'm glad to see that our opt-out numbers are lower than what we projected and budgeted, and which has given us that cushion in there. And I'm happy to see that the reserves are going up, and although we're not on target, we're moving in the right direction. Councilmember LaCava?
Yeah, I would certainly echo your comments, Chair, moving in the right direction. And I think if we understand that the projected number or the budgeted numbers are not a straight line across the entire fiscal year, that it changes for a variety of factors. So thank you for upping your game in terms of your graphical depiction of this information, trying to make it a little more interesting. And then just kind of a random question, Dr. Washington. I noticed in the detailed breakout that we budget for 1% uncollectibles. And when it shows year to date, it's exactly 1%. And I was wondering if we are actually tracking how much is 30 days, 60 days out, or how many we're actually deeming as uncollectible.
Yes, Director LaCava, we are tracking that, and that gets baked into our financial statement at some point. We get the receivable reports, and we're monitoring the receivable reports. And based on the receivables, we're able to track where we are from a collection standpoint.
Okay. I know I heard a report from SDG&E the other day about their access of state and federal funds to help ratepayers who are facing challenging times. Do we have that same program or not?
So I'll certainly have to circle back with you for
Okay.
the details on that, Director LaCava, but we are tracking it.
Okay, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I just heard this yesterday, so it kind of popped into my head.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. We are tracking it, and we expect because those funds apply to primarily the residential ratepayers. And so given the timing of our ramp on and rollout to the residential customers, our impact is expected to be minimal. But I'll certainly circle back with more details.
Okay, I appreciate that. Yeah, just again, repeating, clearly we've done some very good work for still a very young organization in terms of hedging our power costs. And you all are doing a great job of tracking that. And I appreciate the monthly reports to keep us informed and see us continue to march towards our reserve goals. So thank you very much, Chair. No other comments.
Thank you, council member. With that, we'll move on to item number 2.
Thank you, Chair Hamora. So during this meeting, we'll also be hearing from our audit team in terms of the work that they've done to really close out our fiscal year end audited financial statement for the period ending 6/30/2022. So we have with us today Brett Bradford and Ali Schaefer that will provide a presentation to the board. Concluding the presentation from Brett, the staff will drop off the line to allow for direct engagement of the auditor with the chair and Director LaCava, members of the Finance Committee. So that said, Brett, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Eric. Good morning, everybody. Our presentation is only about 10 slides here. Please feel free to interrupt me at any time with questions, though. The point of our being present is to give communication in both directions. So please raise your hand if you have any questions. Quick introductory slides. I've been around for a while doing government audits, and currently we're working with several CCAs, and I'm lucky enough to have Ali, who's been working on the CCAs for a few years as well now, helping me out with the audit, and some other staff as well behind the scenes. If you could advance the slide, please. So not to bury the lead, the 22 audit is almost done, and we are expecting an unmodified opinion. That's an auditor speak. That's a good thing, which means the financial statements are stated materially accurately. And the other important part of our audit, no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in internal control were noted. Again, a little more auditor speak there, but that's all good stuff. If we could advance that, please. So this slide just takes us through, it's a quick kind of refresher on the relative roles and responsibilities of management and the auditor. Management being Eric, Tim, and their team, along with Maher, and us being the auditor, of course. I won't go through each step here. The most important thing here to note is that management is responsible for preparing the financial statements. And that's how we want it, because that means we can maintain our independence as the auditor. We go through these various steps, of course, to do our audit separate from the preparation of the financial statements. At the end of the day, we provide the audited financial statements with our opinion at the front there. Really, the work product there, the opinion is our part of the process. And that means that the financials, which have been prepared independently, are materially accurately stated. So if we could go to the next slide. Slide takes us through some of the significant areas of focus. Revenue recognition, always important. We have some big numbers and continuing to grow numbers there. Accounts receivable and accrued revenue. We test billings. We look at total cash received during the year. We do analytical procedures. And like I said, we specifically look at certain bills, a sample of them for accuracy, recalculation, make sure the numbers are flowing correctly, relate to the rates, structures, and just make sure everything looks okay there. Cash and securities, we send confirmations directly to financial institutions. And you can advance, please. On the other side of the income statement, we've got accrued cost of electricity. We want to make sure that all the energy that where revenue is being recognized for the sale of, that all of that cost is also being recognized, so that when you look at your bottom line of operating income, it's a true and accurate measure of what took place during the period and how and what the results are. Supplier security deposits, we review contracts and determine completeness of amounts recorded. Debt, so we send again confirmations directly to the lenders. And then on financial statement disclosures, those lengthy disclosures after the financials, as we've all seen at some point, no doubt, we make sure they're complete and without bias. And complete means in compliance with GAAP for governmental entities. We tie them all up together, make a few comments, but they'll come over very clean. And that completes the process on the notes. If you could advance, please. So our auditing standards under which we conduct the audit, determined by the AICPA, the professional standards at a minimum that every auditor conducting audits of governmental entities has to follow, require certain communications. Some of these sound a little redundant and kind of no-brainers, but we are required to communicate it. So here we are. The significant accounting policies adopted by SDCP throughout the periods audited appear appropriate and consistently applied. That's a good thing. No alternative treatments of accounting principles for material items in the financial statements have been discussed with management. There was no debate on how to proceed with something in terms of the accounting. We can advance, please. Not expecting to propose any adjustments to the financial statements. And at this point, like I was saying, we're at about 95, 98% completion, just kind of putting a bow on it, taking a few little things, putting it through our quality control process to make sure we're good. Whereas auditors, once we issue that report with our signature, we don't want any material changes to come down. So we're particular about that finalization process. We've not identified any significant and unusual transactions or applications of accounting principles where lack of authoritative guidance exists. Means not going on a limb on how you're interpreting any accounting guidance or anything like that. So that's also a good thing. Could advance, please. And this is a good one. No disagreements with management concerning the scope of the audit, the application of accounting principles, or the base for management's judgments on any significant matters. And we have not encountered any difficulties in dealing with management during the performance of our audit. Advance. And that concludes the slides. Now I'm happy to answer any questions. Like Eric said, I think we're going to have a separate little closed session after this, which is typical for some more one-on-one or two-on-one interaction with the auditor. Can I answer any questions whatsoever?
Questions, council member?
Yeah, thank you. Brett, thank you for the presentation, Alejandro, for your work on that. I pronounced your name wrong, so I apologize on that. I have a couple of questions, but they're really like what you said, Brett. You have your level of responsibility, we have ours, and I realize it's only preliminary, but I think you'll probably have heard this from other boards as well. Was there any of your audit work not performed due to any limitations placed on you by management?
Scope limitations? No, there were no scope limitations. If there were scope limitations, we would have to note that in our report.
Okay. And your audit was performed in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards or generally accepted government auditing standards?
We do this one, and this is completely at the request of management and the board. We can follow both sets of standards or one. In certain situations, and some of you may know this from your familiarity with working on municipalities, county, etc. So the generally accepted standings are the baseline standards that we must follow. I can't do anything less than that. Then there's also the government auditing standards, which tax a few extra things on top of it. The government auditing standards, if you were doing a single audit, meaning you got spent over $750,000 in federal expenditures and federally sourced money, that would kick us into that single audit territory, which would require the government auditing standards. I believe we're doing this audit under the generally accepted standards, and most of the CCAs are that way, with the exception of those that this year with some of that cap money that was referred to earlier flowing out there, causing the single audit requirement to be triggered. So this is generally accepted auditing standards, but we will do whatever is requested of us.
When there any new accounting principles adopted or any changes made, or did you recommend? You answered some of this, but
Sure. Yeah, the big one this year kind of floating out, and you may have seen again with some of your other municipalities you're associated with, is GASB 87. There's no material adjustment that resulted from that this year. Basically, that is pulling all operating leases that are over 1 year in length onto the balance sheet with a right of use asset and a corresponding lease liability. But there was nothing, no material leases there to pull in. If you down the road enter into a five-year lease for an office space, then at that time that would be pulled in onto the balance sheet. The way they're done now for operating leases is just you expense it as you pay it, essentially. So that's the only accounting standard that could have come into play, but wasn't material for San Diego.
Yeah. And is there any areas in the financial statements in which we could have been more explicit or transparent, provide better clarity for a user to better understand our financial statement?
No, no, short answer.
Okay. And it sounds like you didn't have any difficulty dealing with management and performing the audit. They provided all the information. There was no disagreements about how the information was presented to you or what you expected to be able to see and review.
Correct.
Okay. I think I'll stop there. I might have some additional questions when it comes to the full board and you're fully done with that. But thank you very much for your work.
No,
Appreciate
thank
it.
you. Thank you for your questions. I like your checklist.
That's right. Yeah, I learned that from somebody else who was chair of the City of San Diego's audit committee. So we're just as accountable as you are, as the management is, in once these audits get finalized. So thank you, Chair. That concludes my questions.
Thank you, council member, for those questions, and I'd like to commend staff for their clean audit and cooperation with the auditing process. Well done. Yes, Dr. Washington.
Chair Mora, I just wanted to raise my hand. I think at this point, staff and our accountant, Mike Maher, should probably drop off the call so that you all can have that direct communication with the board.
Sounds good. Thank you again. We'll see you next time.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Brett. Thank you, Ali. Mike, I'll talk with you soon.
Council member, for any further questions for the auditors?
No, they probably should have dropped off earlier. Well, we're learning great. It's always exciting to be with a young organization as we learn our way through. Well, since they did drop off, I'll just ask, how would you compare San Diego Community Powers reporting to comparable organizations like other CPAs up and down?
Yeah, great question. So we're working with about 8-ish CCAs right now. To be totally frank, Maher works with all of them. There was one a few years ago that was trying to do the accounting on their own. This is just for illustrative purposes, and trying to do the accounting on their own without having specialists involved, because it is fairly complex. And that was not a good situation. So my point is that having somebody involved that understands the accounting, the industry, and how the CCAs work is a very good thing. And you've got, great talented folks with the employees, Eric and Tim, but you having somebody involved in the accounting that also works with it day in, day out, and the particulars of the CCAs is great. So that's one factor that I'll note is common to all the CCAs that we're working with, and it's a good thing. The other thing is the CCAs really only do one thing, buy and sell electricity, and that keeps it simple. I'm sure, yes, looks like at least one of you was on a city board or city council. Cities, unfortunately, they have the dubious distinction of having every program dumped on them with many funds set up, and it's a real struggle. Even though the dollars are smaller, probably it can be a struggle to manage. All those grants, funding sources, the various requirements. CCAs have the luxury. Yes, there's big dollars, but they're only doing that one thing, and they can do that. Focus on doing that well. So that's the other reason that the CCAs have had a good run, and we've had good experience with them, at least the ones that we've been working with in terms of accounting and reporting.
Okay. Then the last question: are there any questions that I have not asked that I should have asked in reviewing this audit?
Brett, did you hear that?
So I believe we're going to be reporting the final. The schedule was just a little too tight to have at the next board meeting to get everything buttoned up. And so I think we're going to report at the November board meeting.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But it'll be a complete product at that time. We should be buttoned up and done, issued final well before then.
Oh, okay. All right. Again, thank you, Brett and Alejandra, for your good work and for presenting in front of the committee. I did miss, so Kimberly, please tell staff that I really appreciate their good work. I neglected to say that the last time. So
I will do that.
sure.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the questioning.
Thank you, everybody.
We're at the end of the agenda. Any announcements? Councilmember LaCava. Thank you all. Good morning. Have a good day. Great way to start the day with a clean audit and financial report.
Well said, sir. Well said.
Take care.
Bye, thank you.